Welcome to Oldsmob 455. We're back in the shop with 68 Javelin, and today we're going to discuss cooling. Now, the motor has been built up considerably compared to what a stock 343 or 290 would be running at, and it had the heavy-duty radiator from the factory. Now, the owner is concerned with temperatures up to 190, feeling as though the older engines don't run like today's cars. You'll have cars that run at 210 nowadays, but they're very efficient and they want that high temperature to get maximum fuel economy and burn all your fuel. But in a car like this, it's running with a carburetor. It's all a bunch of compromises. There's inconsistencies, so he doesn't ever want to run into driving it on a really hot day and be stuck in a traffic jam and go into an overheating situation, because then you're just throwing your money away. He's got a lot of money invested in this engine, and today we're just going to discuss upgrades to a more modern aluminum radiator that's got more capacity. Anytime you add more water, you're going to end up having less chance of overheating, if you only had a small amount of water. And we've got a different thermostat. Now we will go to the thermostat and show you the differences. So this is even a step up from the stock situation, but you'll see how the water is only flowing through this small opening when this thermostatic spring heats up from water temperature, and then it opens up and your water is going to flow through that size. Now there's race car drivers that stay at a steady 8,000 RPM on NASCAR. They don't even play with this. This would be a situation where you'd have to rely on an item that they don't want to take chances on. So they would just restrict water flow. They know their engine so well that they put in the right size restriction at that RPM and that amount of airflow going through that radiator, and they've figured out what size keeps the water in the block and keeps the water in the radiator for the right amount of time, and they can keep the temperature steady. In a car that's driven on the street, you're winding out once in a while and then you're idling, and when you start up cold, you want this thing to build heat into the motor, and as it gets hot, then this thing will thermostatically open and let some cold air in. This one, you can see the opening is way bigger, and this whole device drops up and down. So he's thinking that the flow is going to be better than just going through this little thing right here. This is called a Mr. Gasket high flow thermostat, and you can just see that it's bigger and allows more to flow, and with the aluminum radiator we should have no problems. There's another thing to consider. When you see more modern cars, they'll have a little hole drilled right through the plate that moves. They're always worried about it, called degassing. A lot of engines sit, the radiators are sitting real low because the front ends on the noses of the cars are all more aerodynamic. You'll see guys that'll have a degassing tank, like Mustangs and stuff, that go up higher. Somehow you have to let air bubbles in your cooling system get up to the top, or if you've got air bubbles alongside the water jacket right around the exhaust valve where you're trying to get heat away from that exhaust valve as fast as you can. It only has a millisecond for that valve touching that valve seat to extract any heat away from the valve. If you've got air there instead of water taking heat away from that combustion chamber, you can understand how a valve would get overheated, and then you see them where they just fold up and they tulip, they call it. So you want to get all the air out of your cooling system. A lot of guys will do this where they just stick the thermostat into the water and then turn the heat on, and then they have a thermometer I don't know if you can pick up on this. It's got a little, cooking thermometer, and I'm up to 150 already. But they'll drop the thing in there, turn the heat up, and they'll keep checking the thermometer. We've already got this up to 155. So this is at 160. We're going to bring this up to 160, and then you'll just see how this thermostatic spring is going to open it up. If it does, if you got a bad thermostat, then it wouldn't work. It's just a real easy test. So this thing functioned all right. You can see the opening right here. And the spring is, you're getting airflow, water flow going through an opening that's, not even as thick as this. Oh yeah, now I can put it all the way through. So now you can see how the water has to go through a restriction. Now it's opening up. I can go back and forth. So it's probably twice the thickness of this 3/16 thick thermometer. It's closing. I'm at 150 and it's shut. This operated in a range of like 150 to 170. 170 it was totally wide open. 150 it was still open, but I couldn't get this through there. We're dropping the new one in. Mr. Gasket. We're up to 160. Yeah, it's starting to open. I'm at 180 now. And she's really big gap here. There you can see how far down this dropped. And it flows through all these three windows. Looks like it's gonna flow a lot better. My buddy was building a drag bike, and we cruised all the way down to Memphis, Tennessee to pick up a drag race bike's frame. And he had a GS, a Skylark, 1970 Buick Skylark GS. They really sucked fuel too. And we drove all the way down to Memphis, had a bunch of junk food. It was a good road trip. Picked up the bike, did a turnaround, coming back, and the thermostat stuck closed. And he had a box of tools, a toolbox in the trunk. But by the time he got the thermostat out, and we just ran no thermostats, I had made it through a swamp to a farmer's house. He gave me a bunch of milk jugs with a rope tied through them, and I had to trudge through a swamp. Got to the car just as he was buttoning everything up with, he siliconed everything, and poured the water back in, fired it up, no leaks, and took off again. So if you're on a road trip, take some tools with you. Now, this doesn't look like much, but the manufacturing of this car and the way it's located, this is all the shroud that even fits in between the radiator fan and the radiator. You see some cars like my 1974 Laguna or a Monte Carlo, you can put cases of beer in between the engine and the front bumper. But this is real close. So this shroud helps the radiator fan pull air through this area. This was an option back in '68, but you can see if you have a fan and it's pulling, if you have a fan out here, it doesn't have as much draw through it. When you see them, and guys will have like one little electric fan, it's only pulling in that area. You're only getting cooling through that area until you're moving the car, and then airflow will pass by. But if sitting at a dead stop, you always see guys that have two small ones are better than one big one. And they've got every option you can imagine, where they come on thermostatically, or when you shut the car off, they continue to run and cool the radiator down. But now you can see where the stock one, they were made from brass and copper. These are aluminum. I hear brass and copper extracts heat faster than aluminum, but this is a lot lighter and it's about as expensive as you can go. If you had one made like that, it would cost me even be up more. You see a lot of these fancy radiator shops and they charge like $550 for a radiator. This one looks pretty nice and it's 200 bucks. I think it's a good deal. Now we're giving you a view looking down the inside of the radiator, and if you ever saw somebody making one of these, they've got different core width. This is 3 separate rows of water flowing down, and this is from top to bottom. So you can see in shipping, this thing must have really gotten something dropped on it, or it fell off a shelf and took a major hit. But this whole bracketry is pushed in and the final core is being bent, and we could straighten it, but you know, when you pay this much, he doesn't really even want to take the chance. You'd have to pull this out because the bolt holes don't even line up with the bracketry and the radiator core support. And when you're spending this much, you know, you should get a perfect product. Otherwise, the quality of the craftsmanship and everything, it's great. It really looks nice. A little history on radiators. Water would come in from your motor. You know, you got a water pump and it's picking it up and it spins around, pushes water through the motor, and then it drops, you know, in the top. And it would flow down, go through it. Now you see cars like Mustangs and Camaros, and they've switched where you got a tank on the side and a tank on the other, and the rows go sideways. Must be better because that's what they've switched to, and the engineers are always smarter, right? So this is just showing you how these little cores, you can see down inside there, the water's flowing through little slits. All these little fins, if you keep them straight, the air will flow through them. A lot of guys will have radiators and they're all dinged up, you know, fins like this, and then there's bugs packed in front of them. If you have that situation, you can take a little duckbill pliers and you can straighten fins out. You'll be there all damn day. But if you got bugs and stuff, at least take a air hose or wet, you know, high pressure, you know, hose and blow the stuff out so your radiator can function. If you got any other kind of stuff going on, guys will put a license plate in their grill, stuff like that. Anything that eliminates or reduces the flow of air going through the opening. It's like a guy running a 18-wheeler truck. You'll see that diesels don't really run that hot, so in the wintertime they'd have like a zip-up envelope up in front, or they've got new radiators that have louvers that open and close. Some of the new cars, to get better gas mileage, even have them. There's louvers in the grill, and if the engine is running cool, why not have it closed and the air goes right over the top? Kind of like the aerodynamics that the guys were doing in NASCAR back in '68 when they took the Charger and moved the grill all the way to the front surface in the Ford Talladega. When you have these recessed grills and stuff, it looks cool, but air gets trapped around in there. Anytime you see guys that'll have an air dam up in front, that's got to force air up into that opening. Then it would be nice to have louvers up on top like a Viper, let the air out, so then you don't start going, you know, floating at high speeds. There's just a lot that we take for granted when it comes to airflow through the radiator. So you're looking down inside the stock radiator. It's not that bad. You can see a little bit of that white corrosion that goes on. That happens when antifreeze isn't taken care of, and you can check to see if your antifreeze is going bad by just using a simple voltmeter. If you stick one end into the antifreeze and then touch the other end to ground, and you're getting any kind of electrolysis through it, your antifreeze is too old. They've got stuff that you can add to it that limits that. They even have stuff called Evans coolant that has no water in it. The problem with water is it boils at 212. So when we put it under pressure, like 17 pounds of pressure when it's running, if you ever were in high school and you had a science class, you can see how water will take longer to boil if you have it under pressure. If you put it under a vacuum, you can even get it to boil at a lower temperature. So water is a very strange thing, how it turns to a solid, like when it turns to ice. It's just, that's what we're using, and if you could eliminate the water from your system, then you never have to worry about boiling and overheating. But it's like $100 to do that, and it's a lifetime thing. You can drain it, you can reuse it, but you gotta flush your block first. Here's another situation that a lot of cars back in the olden days didn't have them. And you'd see guys pulling into a car show, and who knows how far away they drove from, but the car's really running warm. And then they get real slow driving, getting into the place where they're gonna have their car show parking spot. Then when they finally get to shut the thing off, thing's been really running hot, okay? And then all of a sudden, spitting out of the overflow and leaves a puddle underneath your car. It's kind of embarrassing. So later years, they're made out of plastic now, and wherever they can have a contour in the inner fender wells, they make it to that shape, and it's, you know, utilizing their space efficiently, and you've got as much capacity as possible. And a lot of times now when you have a car, the tank is up higher, and then they have it where you fill it from that area, okay? And it'll, you know, you can see through it. It's like a milk jug, and you can see through it, and you fill it when it's hot or when it's cold. There's two different levels. On this, guys that know what they're doing working on cars, they're gonna check this once in a while. But you'll have two different heights of the tube coming out of the top of the radiator underneath the pressure cap. If it finally gets so hot that it blows it out, you go through one hose, and it'll give you a little area of cushion for expansion and contraction of your hot fluids in the radiator. And if it gets all the way up to the top one, then you run that down and it'll pee out the bottom. But it's kind of embarrassing. And it looks a little bright work. And you got it on the side of your shiny radiator. You can go over this way and you'll see how you got this polished aluminum radiator, and then you got a polished aluminum tank. You start putting bright work in there after you've done everything else with your car. You want to make the when you lift the hood, it doesn't look grubby underneath there. And an overflow tank is another way you can ensure that the next time you start it up, your radiator is all the way up to capacity. It's going to flow better if you've got the water right up to the top of the radiator, especially with this type, where, you know, it's going up to the top and then flowing down. How is it supposed to? You'd have to wait for the thing to get hot enough and expand the fluids to, you know, get up to the top and start going down through the radiator tubes. Because the tube is up higher right here and the fluid is expanded, when you cool down and the fluids contract, it actually creates a vacuum, and it'll pull the fluid back into your radiator, and then you maintain the right level. We've got to send this back. When he ordered it, it took like about a week to get it. So who knows how long it's going to take when we get the finished project, finished product back. We'll install it, and then we can watch have the camera in the car, and then we'll check the temperature as we're driving in traffic